Hello, hello. Welcome back to the stream. I'm Harry. Going to be studying for the GMAT today. Who have I got with me today? Say hello in the chat. All right. Well, if the audio is okay, hopefully you can hear the music in the background, not too loud. Then I'll just get on with it, I think. Just double check a couple of things quickly. Alrighty. Well, anyway, I will just get started. So if you've seen any of my other streams, you kind of know the drill. I'm basically streaming to commit to studying at least a little bit every day. And what I normally do is just go through some questions, talk through my logic after I go through it, and yeah, kind of go from there, I suppose. I'm on a different site this time just to see how it goes with a different style of question. So this one doesn't have its own sort of inbuilt stopwatch to track how long you take on each question, so I'll just sort of have that on the side to myself. Otherwise, I will just get going. So I've got a question on screen. I haven't read it at all yet. Looking at sentence correction, which is kind of following on from what I was doing previously. And yeah, I will probably have to start adding a little bit more variety as we go, but right now I'm sort of focused on learning the basic kind of grammar and stuff for sentence correction, so well, hopefully it pays off a little bit in some of these questions. And that's it. I'll kick into it. Cool. Welcome to the stream. Just starting this question. All right. 1 minute, 5 seconds, and I got a question right. Nice way to start. It seems like a habit I wasn't making for myself in the last stream. I think I got more wrong than I did right last stream, which is fine, as long as I'm learning from it. But yeah, so I'll just talk through my logic on kind of how I got to where I got to before I then go and see what the answer actually sort of says. But yeah, whoever just joined, feel free to say hello in the chat. And if you're looking at me reading a question and you're going, well, why is this hard? Like, what's wrong with you? Why is this hard? Or wait, I have no idea what you did. Like, hit me up. Let's chat about it. But yeah, to start this question, it was a bit wordy. So it is a little bit hard to kind of read just when you first take it in. But yeah, but when so I just started, basically I just read it through once to see if I could understand what the meaning is. That's always pretty much my first step, is can I understand what it's trying to say? And so sometimes I have to read it pretty slowly to actually do that. So I read this: despite its being soft enough to grow, a newborn human has a skull that is not an unbroken casing with soft spots. Rather, it is a series of body plates joined together by anatomical lines known as sutures. And so if I try to just sort of simplify what I read into words that I understand, I'm understanding this to mean something like, so a newborn human, so a baby's skull is soft, but it's not one piece that's kind of unbroken. It's actually a bunch of separate pieces sort of put together. And I kind of understood some of that already. Like I already sort of knew somewhat that baby skulls are sort of plates that end up kind of, they're not actually one solid bone, the skull. Um, so understanding that, the first thing that jumped out to me was, despite it, blah, 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 rather it is, I already kind of feel like it should be but rather. That's the first thing that jumps out to me is, if something is not this, but rather that. And so the first thing I did was I just looked through the answer choices for options that said but rather to see what they were. And I kind of, based on that, was almost ready to rule out all three of the other options that didn't have but rather. I don't know if technically that's the right thing to do, but because it could be that potentially but without the rather might be okay. I'm not sure 100% on that actually. I need to sort of check what the specific GMAT rule is on that, whether it can be just but or but rather. But I suspected that but rather was going to be correct. So when I saw two options with it, I thought it's probably going to be one of those two. And then the other big difference between all of the answer choices was starting with despite or although, which actually have opposite meanings. So that was always going to be a kind of a clear way to sort of figure out which one might be right. And so I came to D and I read that one. It said, although soft enough to grow, a newborn human skull is not an unbroken casing with soft spots, but rather blah, 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 blah. So really what I had to figure out between although and despite was which one is actually going to be more appropriate to say that, because they're showing a comparison, being that it's not one bone, it's multiple pieces. And so is it being soft going to be supporting the idea that it would be one bone, or would it be saying that it shouldn't be one bone? So if we were going to say despite being soft enough to grow, then that's assuming, like, then the underlying kind of inference there is that it being soft would normally imply that it is an unbroken casing, that it's like it's soft, so it should be one bone. And although is basically saying that, well, hang on. No, actually, I think that's wrong, actually. Now that I think about it, although and despite would be on the same side of that. Although and despite are both sort of saying, it's like, well, even though it's this. So what is the actual difference there? Despite being soft enough to grow, although soft enough to grow, a newborn human skull is not an unbroken casing. Hmm. Well, actually, maybe either one of those, maybe either despite or although is all right, and maybe it's actually the nor does it have versus with. That's actually the main point. Yeah, so the truth is, I kind of probably did answer this a little too quickly, just because I ended up going with the one that read like it was going to be the most correct, but in theory it might not be. So let's see what the explanation says. Creating a filter. In the original sentence, the phrase, despite its being soft enough to grow, grammatically modifies human. And that's not the intended meaning. The skull of the newborn is what's soft, according to the intended meaning. So we eliminate A and go straight to the answer choices to eliminate others with modification errors. All right, that's interesting. I mean, if I scroll back up for a second. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so this modifier right at the start, being that it is, what kind of modifier did we say? Those are, I really shouldn't be streaming so late. My brain is just never going to be at my best at this time. Hmm. Is that a coordinating conjunction? Yeah, clearly I have more theory to read, but anyway, moving on. So applying the filter, as it turns out, B through E are all free of the error in A, so we'll move straight to finding defects in the other choices. Yeah, so the point was that in this one, this opening modifier should be modifying the closest noun, which is a newborn human. And so a newborn human is, well, I guess you could say that yes, a newborn human is soft enough to grow, but what it's actually trying to talk about is skull. And so despite it being soft enough to grow, it's modifying human when it wants to be modifying skull. So that's what makes that wrong. That's fair enough. I didn't actually even really catch that because I already was looking at rather it is and ruling it out based on that. The rest all, on the other hand, are all talking about a human skull. So it doesn't have that same modifier error. So that's fine. Finding objective defects. Choices B and C use the gerund unnecessarily in the phrase, despite being. So we focus on D and E. So that's basically saying we ruled out B and C based on the fact that they both use the word being unnecessarily, which apparently is a pretty common sort of error that comes up is like something doesn't have to, people like you don't use being as much as very often at all. It's more often than not going to be the wrong answer. So so they ruled out B and C based on that. And we focus on D and E, which end differently. The phrase but rather is clear in this case, in which we are saying the baby's skull is not one thing, but rather another. Since the word but alone can mean different things, we prefer to use but rather. So that actually pretty clearly addresses the thing that I wasn't sure about earlier, which was to say it can mean, I think you can just say but rather is more clear. So that's good. But though it's not an absolute requirement. So that actually more or less verbatim confirms what I was saying. So that's good. Choice E is scarcely flawed, but D is objectively clearer and still succinct. The correct answer is D. So they said E doesn't have any problems of its own, but D is clearer. And so D and E are identical, except one says but rather and the other one says but. And that was actually the exact same logic I used to rule out E. I said, I think that you can just say but, it doesn't have to be but rather, but I think but rather is clearer. And that was exactly what I said to rule out E. So that makes me feel a little bit better at least. But a couple of things I didn't pay attention to, and I should have, was the fact that we had a modifier at the beginning of the sentence, and it wasn't like a participial phrase, because I think a participial phrase at the start of the sentence would mean it can actually, no, participial phrases at the end would modify the whole thing. I'm just going to confirm what I'm saying. At the end of the sentence, it describes the whole clause before, but at the start, it still only describes the nearest, the closest noun. And absolute phrase, if it's infinitive phrases, prepositional phrase. So prepositional phrase modifies the whole clause, either before or after. So yeah, I don't think that is what you'd call a prepositional phrase. So it's not relevant, but that's a good exception to keep in mind. A prepositional phrase when it's acting as an adverb. So even in that case, if we would call this a prepositional phrase, it's not an adverb, it's an adjective, because it's describing skull. It's not describing any verb. So yeah, I don't think there's a scenario where this would be modifying anything more than just the noun next to it. So yeah, that's a good thing for me to pick up on that I didn't quite. So yeah, hello to the person just joining me. Feel free to say hello and chat. Ask any questions. If anything I'm saying doesn't make any sense, tell me it doesn't make sense. Yeah, cool. Otherwise, I'm just going to go to the next question. Do a few more. I think I'm just going to look at sentence correction tonight. I'm pretty tired, so I'm not really at my best, let's say. And so I'll just do a few sentence correction questions. These ones will probably be pretty easy compared to some of the ones I've seen in previous streams. Starting the clock on this one. Let's go. Minute 2. And I apparently got it wrong. I would be curious to see what they tell me what they tell me I did wrong in this one, actually. I'm definitely curious. So again, I'll just step through my logic. Really, I got to start trying to do that a little quicker than I have been. But I'll step through my logic, and then I'll see where they tell me I got it wrong. So during medieval times, Augustine monks in Scotland favored using watercress as a means to combat scurvy and administering hemlock as a painkiller, revealing a detailed knowledge of the medicinal properties of herbs. Now I said C, they're saying A, and I mean, yeah, this is going to be interesting. So first thing I did, read the question, the given statement, try to understand what I think it's saying. Basically, they're saying that back in the day, in medieval times, in Scotland, they used to use these herbs for different medicinal things. So to try to beat scurvy and as a painkiller, they had these two different herbs they would use. Um, so that's fine. So now what's the best way of saying it? So like looking at the answer choices, I kind of just scanned down. First thing, the second thing I did was just scan down and looked at kind of how they were breaking it up. And the first thing that jumped out at me in that step was the start, to combat scurvy, of combating scurvy, and for combating scurvy were three different options. And then the second part was looking at the end of the underlined part, which is how they're dealing with administration of hemlock. So is it administering? Is it to administer and administer? Administration of? So there's a lot more variety on this side. But yeah, so I figured that I needed to figure out which was the appropriate start to this before I could figure out the end. Because whatever it was, it would have to be parallel. It would have to be the same structure. It would have to be the same type of grammatical structure on either side of the word and. And I figured it would be easiest to figure out what the start of it was based on the fact that it led into as a means. Which brings me to why I ended up looking at C as my choice. I thought that the correct idiom for, like the idiomatic use of as a means, would be of. I thought it would be of, as a means of doing something, as a means of achieving something, as a means of combating something. I thought that was the appropriate idiom. As a means to do something sounds wrong to me. I thought that was wrong. For something definitely seemed wrong. But of I thought was the appropriate idiom. So they preferred to use watercress as a means of doing something, combating scurvy. And then once we knew it was of, well, at least once I thought it was of, it's of combating scurvy. So combating is a participle. So to be parallel, I need to match it on the other side. So a means of combating scurvy and a means of administering hemlock as a painkiller. Now, actually, when I say it like that, it makes me think it sounds funny because a means of administering hemlock is wrong. Okay, yeah. A means of administering hemlock doesn't sound right at all. So even though it sounds right for scurvy, this is not administering hemlock is not actually parallel with combating scurvy. Not really. I mean, yes, it's participle verbs, but yeah, it's starting to make sense to me where I went wrong. Favored using watercress as a means of. If I was doing if I actually did what I was trying to do of keeping it parallel in that way, I'd be saying that they favored using watercress as a means of combating scurvy, and they also favored using watercress as a means of administering hemlock. So that's clearly not what they're trying to say. They're not trying to say that watercress is used for administering hemlock as a painkiller. They're just saying that they use watercress for scurvy and they use hemlock for painkillers. So that's why that's actually not correct. So to be able to make it parallel, it's now they're bringing it all the way up back to favored, and then this is where the parallelism should start. They favored using watercress as a means to combat scurvy and administering hemlock as a painkiller. So it's using is parallel with administering, and I was trying to make it parallel with combating. Okay, so that does actually make sense, but how would I avoid making that same mistake again? It's a tough one. So as a means to combat scurvy. Well, I guess I just have to, if I'm testing parallelism like I just did, I have to also make sure that I check it the way that I just did. As a means of combating scurvy and of administering hemlock, okay, I only checked it of combating versus of administering and going, yep, that sounds right. But I needed to take it back a step and say means of combating scurvy, means of administering hemlock. That's what it's actually becoming parallel. And so I didn't do that, and if I had, it might have been clearer. So that would have taken me a few extra seconds to spot, and then I don't know, maybe 15, 20 seconds more to actually kind of then come to the right answer. But yeah, the idiomatic issue that I was talking about isn't really relevant if we're talking about, yeah, like looking at that as one sort of, yeah, using watercress as a means to combat scurvy and administering hemlock as a painkiller. Yeah, I mean that's still, I'm still a little bit iffy on this, to be honest, on the to combat scurvy. But anyway, let's see what the explanation says before I move on. In this sentence, there is a potential parallelism issue between combat and administering. Well, that much I recognized, so yay me. Should administering be administer? The intended meaning of the sentence will be the judge. We look closer at what it's trying to say. We're talking about a use of watercress and a different use of hemlock. Right, and that's the part that I didn't quite pick up on. Administering is parallel with using, and therefore is correct. Yeah, again, that's what I didn't pick up. I thought administering was parallel with combating, which was wrong in the end. So that means that A might be right, and we can take our observation to filter the other answer choices. Based on the decision about A, choices B, D, and E are defective. So let's go back to B, D, and E and just check them really quickly. So to combat scurvy and to administer hemlock. Yeah, so this is confirming the same meaning issue that I had, which is that watercress is what helps us combat scurvy and helps us administer hemlock. No, it doesn't help us administer hemlock. And it's not a means of us administering hemlock. Well, that's C, which is not one of them. So D, of combating scurvy and administer hemlock. Well, that's just wrong because administer would have to be administering. So that's wrong anyway. And for combating scurvy and the administration of hemlock. So again, watercress is not a means, the administration of. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So in C, administering looks like it's parallel with using, but it's preceded by of, and therefore grammatically under the jurisdiction of combating. Well, that much I recognize because I was trying to make it parallel with combating because I thought of was correct. But the fact that we don't want it parallel with combating is why of became wrong. So C is wrong. That leaves A as the correct answer. We didn't have to worry about whether to combat or of combating was better. But the answer to that is that when we are talking about a verb, the infinitive will be superior. Whereas a preposition such as of is best used with a true noun, not a gerund. Okay, let me think about that for just a second. Okay, we didn't need to know that here, that's what they're saying, but assuming that we did. When we're talking about a verb, the infinitive is superior. A preposition such as of is best used with a true noun, not a gerund. So they're saying, so the gerund being combating. So what they're saying there is of should be with an actual noun, not with combating, pretending to be a noun. I mean, what would be a noun that fits in that idiom of means? They use watercress as a means of pie. Like, no, I don't know. I don't think it works in that specific idiom. Um, but I mean, if that is a legitimate rule to keep in mind, then that's useful to know. Infinitive will be superior. A preposition such as of is best used with a true noun, not a gerund. I'm just going to copy and paste this into some notes I have on sentence correction, so I can come back and look at it later on when I'm in a better kind of state to be able to understand it. Okay. All right. I think that's useful though, so it was a good question in the end. Thank you. All right, next question. And I'll start the clock again now. All right. Paused at 46 seconds. Okay, so that one was quick because I thought it was easy. Potentially at the risk of making the same mistake I make really frequently, which is not spending enough time on questions. But yeah, I thought it was easy, so I just went ahead. What was my logic? Well, again, read the sentence, tried to understand what it was trying to say. So they're talking about self-driving cars, and they're saying that this prototype, it went off-road and did well using this laser system that they've got. So basically they're trying to say that it's ready for use on roads. Anything a road could throw at it, it's ready for it. So that's what it's trying to say. And so if I scan down to the answer choices, like what are the kind of the key differences or splits between my options when I look at them? Well, proved as equipped comes up twice. And then there's proved itself equipped, proved to be as equipped, and proved to have been equipped. Those look like the main differences, and if I look at it again, the ends of each sentence I think is identical. Any conditions roads could put in front of it, could put in front of it, could put in front of it, could put in front of it. Yeah, so everything after the word any, it looks like it's identical in all the options. So it has to be just based on the split at the start. And so within that, there's the phrasing of how they use the word prove, or the verb prove, but then there's also the verb navigate and how that's set up as well. Proved, equipped, navigate, those three verbs. So yeah, so basically all I did then was I scanned through them and tried to figure out what looked like the appropriate use. So proved as equipped for navigating any conditions, even without exactly identifying the problem with it. It sounds clunky, it doesn't sound right, but in theory you should try to find out what's actually wrong with it. So proved as equipped for navigating. I don't think you prove something as equipped. That's the part that looked awkward to me. Being as equipped sounded wrong. Yeah, you don't prove something as, you prove it to be something, kind of like down here, but skipping ahead. Anyway, so proved as, I think, is just idiomatically incorrect. And I seem to be relying on idioms a lot, which is a little scary because that's probably not going to help me actually in the exam itself. But anyway, so I ruled it out based on proved as sounding wrong. Option B, proved itself equipped to navigate any conditions. And I don't need to read the rest because none of it's really relevant. So all I'm saying is it's proved itself to deal with conditions. So proved itself equipped to navigate. That sounds right to me. That sounds fine. It's proved itself equipped. That's fine. To navigate. It's equipped to do a thing. Awesome. So that seems fine. So I did not rule it out. Went to C. Proved as equipped to navigate any conditions. Same problem as option A. Proved as equipped, just I think is wrong. And then with D, now I know I just said proved to be is a more appropriate use of the word prove rather than as, but then they put as on anyway, which again I think makes it wrong. So if it was prove, although already obsolete, proved to be equipped to navigate, that might still be correct, but then it would be a question of, is it better to say to be or itself? And I'd still say itself is better, because it's unnecessary to kind of have the verb be here, or the verb to be here. But the bigger issue with this is the fact that prove is present tense instead of past. We're clearly talking about, I mean, if this prototype is already obsolete, we're clearly talking about something that happened in the past, as opposed to happening, well, even if it was present, it's like the self-driving car proved to be. It should still be proves to be equipped, even if it was present tense. So if this was self-driving cars proved to be equipped, because there's multiple of them being tested at the same time right now, sure, but that's not what it is, so that's out. And then E, proved to have been equipped for navigating. This seems unnecessarily wordy. So proved to have been equipped is talking about the fact that it was equipped before the test. So it was ready for the test that they were doing. But we don't really need to say that because we're already kind of acknowledging that this test happened in the past and it was ready during that test. So it's much more direct and clear to say itself equipped. Like at that moment, at the time of the test, it was equipped. So I think based on the fact that of all the options, B was the clearest, that I ended up going straight to it. And like I say, I didn't end up taking too much time, 46 seconds. So it jumped out to me as being clearly the most obvious and clear correct answer. So let's see what they say. Creating filter. The original sentence is defective since the comparative as always properly comes in pairs. The prototype must be as equipped as something else for the word to be used correctly. Okay, that is a much clearer way of saying what was wrong with using the word as compared to me just saying as sounds wrong there. So that's really clear, and that's actually good to understand. As gets used for comparisons, and so to compare something has to be as something as another thing. So it has to be two as's comparing one thing to the other. And none of these that use the word as did that, which is actually the thing that made them wrong. So I suspect the next line in the explanation is going to say, this was the problem with A, and we identify that C and D have the same problem, so we rule them out as well. I think that's what it's going to say. So let's go. Applying the filter, we eliminate choices A and C, and also D, for that matter. There's a sneaky as after 2B. See, I did pick up on that. So we're left with B and E. Choice E's verb tense is unnecessarily complex. That's almost exactly what I said, which is awesome. It appears to refer to some other time in the past that isn't mentioned in the sentence, i.e., a time before the test happened, where it had been prepared. Again, what I said, which is awesome. So the correct answer is B. It's just the clearer answer. I like this one. I finally got one where all my logic was consistent with the correct answer. And I was actually able to answer it in a reasonable amount of time, too. So that's nice. That's a small victory. Based on that victory, I'll do one more question. So we're going on 45 minutes here, so hopefully I'll make this one under an hour and keep it short. In case anyone does decide to watch this, it'll be a little bit more consumable. All right, questions on the screen. I haven't read it yet at all. Restarting the clock now. "43 seconds. Oh, 43 seconds, but I got it wrong. Oh my God. Yes, I really need to take the extra few seconds. Every time, it's always the same problem. I am rushing. Okay, so stepping through the logic, I'm gonna get quicker and quicker at this, guys. According to one biographer, Steve Jobs' passion for the details of music, philosophy, and other fields in the humanities were critical to his success, influencing his sense of design as much as his technological savvy did. First off, his technological savvy, that is already a problem, but it's a problem that's going to be shared between all the answer choices. So it's a problem in the sentence itself. But I think that should be technological savviness. But anyway, that's beside the point. Because like I say, that's going to be the same problem with all the answer choices. So it's just a problem with the sentence. So going for the problems in the sentence that I can actually do anything about, I more or less ruled out A and B because, like I ruled them out very quickly because those other fields was wrong. The list is pretty clearly details of. So it's details of music, details of philosophy, and details of other fields in the humanities. If we say those other fields, what exactly is those? Those is it's a type of pronoun, I think. When you're referring to some kind of you're referring to something like in a collective. It's a collective pronoun. Is that what that's called? Something like that. Yeah, I'm just trying to quickly check my notes. A plural pronoun. Yeah. In any case, yeah, plural pronoun. So it's referring to fields in the humanities, presumably that we've mentioned somewhere else, but we don't know where that is, so it's not appropriate. So we don't need the word those here, and we don't need those. We don't need the word those here. It makes it unclear, and we don't know what that pronoun those is referring to. So I ruled out A and B like immediately, and then I thought I was being real clever because I looked at the details of music, details of philosophy, and details of other fields. Um, and without taking even just an extra 2 seconds to make sure that I was reading the sentence correctly when I looked at that, I thought being has to be past tense here and plural. So specifically plural. It's details needs to be plural. And I scanned through this, and E was the only one that was plural, so I chose it. And that was clearly a trap that the question is trying to set. They know that someone is going to do what I did, so that's why they have that option there. But it wasn't the details that were critical. It was Steve Jobs' passion for the details. His passion was critical to his success. So, a really simple thing I could have done to avoid this mistake is when I did my first read of the sentence to understand its meaning, I really should have done, I think Magoosh on their YouTube channel, they call it the slash and burn, where you get rid of everything in the sentence that's unnecessary to just get to the core of the sentence, and that tells you what the sentence's meaning is. And I think that would have been a very quick and easy way for me to very clearly see what the correct pronouns, verb, and what the correct verb tense should have been. So yeah, and if I do that, I'll do that really quickly now. So I can scrap the start because it's just a modifier. Steve Jobs is our subject. Steve Jobs' passion, his passion is our subject. Steve Jobs' passion, and for the details, blah, 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 are all just description. So for the details of music, philosophy, and other fields of the humanities, all of that's just description. It's all just describing his passion. What is his passion about? What kind of passion is it? It's a passion for the details of music, etc. So Steve Jobs' passion was critical to his success. And then all the rest of this is still a modifier as well, saying, how is it critical? Well, it was critical because it influenced his sense of design, etc., etc. So the core of this sentence is Steve Jobs' passion was critical to his success. And if I had have just understood that in my first read of the sentence, it would have been really clear to me that I can rule out E as opposed to keeping it in because of the plural were. And so if I had done that, I think everything else would have gone through the same way. I would have said, okay, look, the sentence is Steve Jobs' passion was critical to his success. Okay, and then maybe I actually go straight to the answer choices and rule out everything that doesn't fit that. Were critical, they're both gone. So I'm looking at was critical to success. Okay, I'm left with B, C, and D, sorry. And then I would also then probably just go with this, I think I would probably immediately think the same thing I did last time, which was those other fields, those is wrong, so that would be gone. And I'd be left with C and D. And then I'd be looking at other fields in the humanities, was critical to his success. Okay, cool. So those two are both identical up to that point. Now it's between influencing his sense of design as much as his technological savviness did, or as it influenced his sense of design as much as his technological savviness did. So Steve Jobs' passion was critical to his success as it influenced his sense of design as much as his technological savviness did. Versus influencing his sense of design as much as his technological savviness did. So I think the key difference between C and D here is because C is a participial phrase at the end of a sentence, it's now modifying the entire clause before it. So it's now modifying all of the passion for the details of, etc., etc. And so it's saying that his passion for all of these things were influencing his sense of design as much as like anything else did. As it influenced his sense of design, so as kind of like the preposition, it kind of, I think this needs to be much closer to the noun itself. And it is ambiguous as well. Well, Steve Jobs' passion was critical to his success as it influenced his sense of design. I mean, maybe, no, it's not ambiguous. I think it's probably pretty clearly talking about his passion, although it was ambiguous enough for me to not read that the first time I read it. But yeah, I think that's just going to be what it is the fact that this is jumping a lot of real estate to get to his passion. The thing that it actually modifies is his passion. His passion influenced his sense of design. And we've got all this stuff in between. And it's not a participial phrase, so therefore it doesn't modify the entire clause the way a participial phrase does. It only modifies the nearest noun, which will be success. It was critical to his success. His success influenced his sense of design. That's what this is technically saying. His success influenced his sense of design. And that's not what it's trying to say. It's trying to say that his passion did. So yeah, that's why that's wrong. So it's going to be, and that's why it's C. So let's see if my amended logic is consistent. The original sentence has a verb error. The grammatical subject corresponding to the verb were is passion, which is grammatically singular. Okay. Right. So the first thing that they noticed was the thing I completely missed. But then on reflection, after seeing the answer, realized it should have been the first thing I noticed as well. Because if I had slashed and burned and gone straight to the passion was critical, I would have known that it shouldn't be were. Yeah, so music, philosophy, and fields are nouns, but they're all within the prepositional phrase beginning with of, so they cannot be the grammatical subject. Okay, we can start by filtering on that error. So applying the filter, we eliminate A and E, which was with the two options that had were. Again, my amended answer, that's what I should have done first. We'll narrow down B, C, and D on other grounds. Okay. Choice B uses the phrase as well as, and that phrase doesn't convey the intended meaning correctly. The as well as doesn't fit because idiomatically we describe influence in terms of degree or amount, how much it influenced, and in terms of quality, whether it did a good job of influencing. So let's just go back to that really quickly. So B, those other fields in the humanities was critical to his success. And it influenced his sense of design as well as his technological savviness did. So they're saying as well as is wrong because his passion can't influence, like you don't influence something well, you influence it a lot, or you influence, well, I mean, isn't saying it influenced it as well as his technological savviness, isn't that saying it's the quality, whether it did a good job of influencing? Anyway, choice D is grammatically legal but distorts the intended meaning, being that it refers to success, I think is what they're saying. Without the word as, the latter phrase is descriptive. With the as, it's giving a reason. So it seems to be saying, why was Jobs' passion critical to his success? because it influenced his design the same amount as his technological savviness did. Because in the intended sense, the latter portion is an elaboration of the main point, not a condition for it. Interesting. So for D, they're saying D is grammatically correct, but they're saying that the reason it's not the best choice is because his passion was critical to his success because it influenced his sense of design. But what they're saying it should be is that it's just influencing a sense of design is just an elaboration. It's saying that it's not because of his passion. No, his passion wasn't critical because it influenced his design. His passion was critical, and furthermore, just so you know, it influenced his design. And they're saying that's the meaning. I mean, okay. If I had read that, I don't think that would have been necessarily obvious to me to say that he, like, maybe his passion for those things was critical only because it influenced his design, his sense of design. I mean, if it didn't influence his sense of design, would it have been critical? I think that's kind of the point. So why is it incorrect to say that it was because of, not just incidentally that? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me for just a few questions. My nightly dose of a few questions. It's I think about a 50-50 hit rate on getting them right and wrong, and making some silly mistakes. And I didn't even use my scratch pad. So what can you do? Anyway, thanks again for anyone who's joined and who decides to watch this later. I appreciate you. Yeah, I hope you have a good day, night, or evening, whatever time it is when you're looking at this. All right.